Welcome, allies, friends, supporters to a special coffee with Dragan. It's going to be an integrated world citizen finance and Canadian citizens finance cup of coffee. It's the third and final part of the third part series, the special China series of Coffee with Dragan. This third is also dedicated to the general world peace, international security, and global prosperity, but specifically to cordial, harmonious, and peaceful relations. SINO-Canadian, SINO-North American, and SINO-Western. This specific reading lecture, and of course with commentary and meditation, and general Draganisms, which are of course digressions, meditations, and thoughts of yours truly. This is going to be the third and final part, as I said, and it specifically will be focused on the China-US trade war. Again, dedication to cordial, harmonious, and friendly Sino-Canadian relations, Sino-North American relations, and Sino-Western relations for world peace. This article that I'm about to read is public information, public knowledge. It's truly from the internet. China-United States trade war, 2018 to present. The date is Tuesday, 29th of January 2019, making this series prior to the Chinese New Year, Asian New Year, Lunar New Year, which will begin February 5th. The year of the pig. Myself, I'm a rat. Paradoxically enough, in astrology, Chinese astrology, the rats are possess good qualities of entrepreneurship, leadership, and ability to rise from crisis, from trauma, of which I've lived through considerably, physically, financially, spiritually. Again, third and final part of Coffee with Dragan special China series. Dedicated to friendly, harmonious, and peaceful Sino-Canadian, Sino-Western, and Sino-North American relations. Trade war. China and the United States are engaged in a trade war as each country continues to dispute tariffs placed on goods traded between them. US President Donald Trump had promised in his campaign to fix China's long-time abuse of the broken international system and unfair practices. The economic disputes occurred before China's entry to the World Trade Organization, but former Presidents George H.W. and that's Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama all failed to solve the problems. In April 2018, the United States filed a request for consultation to the World Trade Organization in regard to concerns that China was violating intellectual property rights in adding various tariffs. The U.S. administration is relying partly on Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 to prevent what it calls unfair trade practices and theft of intellectual property. Certainly that's a concern. Intellectual property, I'm not just saying for China or for the United States or other countries, but locally, nationally, and internationally. Myself as a poet, of course, who has made his poetry public, a glimmer, a small piece, a tiny portion of my poetry public, is concerned with intellectual property rights as an artist, writer, songwriter, poet. Is something, of course, that personally concerns me a lot. This gives the president the authority to unilaterally impose fines or other penalties on a trading partner if it is deemed to be unfairly harming U.S. business interests, especially if it violated international trade agreements. In August 2017, the U.S. opened a formal investigation into attacks on the intellectual property of the U.S. and its allies. This is from the quote from the government, which cost the U.S. alone an estimated 225 and 600 billion a year in losses. I have to say that this is an estimation which is in billions. Again, remind everybody that a billion is 1,000 million. 1 billion is it's a microeconomics. That a billion is 1,000 million. So estimating so many billions is certainly, this estimation seems to be, it's huge, right? 1 billion is 1,000 million. Or this is all estimations, but nonetheless, in November 1st, retrieved from the World Trade Organization website, Section 301, Action Against China's Intellectual Property Regime, questioned the WTO Goods Council. In 2018, regardless of tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, China's annual trade surplus reached a record of 323.32 billion. So in 2018, regardless of tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, China's annual trade surplus reached a record of 323.32 billion. This is from the Wall Street Journal. China's annual trade surplus with the US hits record despite Trump's tariff is offensive. Of course, that's wording of the tariffs. China's annual trade surplus reached a record of 323.32 billion. 1 billion is 1,000 million. This is a macro level, mega huge number. It's 323 billion in surplus to trade. So after the imports and the exports are balanced, of course this is within a year, the trade that takes place, of course, between different corporations and organizations, public and private, in China and the United States, it's the biggest level of commerce in the world. Right? This accounts for a big percentage of global international trade of import and export. Our trade surplus is a huge number, I have to admit. The result is that the US believes Chinese laws undermine intellectual property rights by forcing foreign companies to engage in joint ventures with Chinese companies, which then gives the Chinese companies access and permission to use, improve, copy, or steal their technologies. This is big, heavy-duty stuff here. Heavy-duty stuff. The result is that the US believes Chinese laws undermine intellectual property rights by forcing foreign companies to engage in joint ventures with Chinese companies, which then gives the Chinese companies access and permission to use, improve, copy, or steal their technology. This is important to regurgitate. And of course, we have to know more details and discern and question which, what, where, what, of course, which companies. So the result is that the US believes, of course, not the whole United States, 337 million of the United States, but a portion of a percentage, XYZ, Mr. Trump administration, of course, it's not the US who believes this. The result is that the US believes, some people in the United States believe, I would frame it that way, believes Chinese laws undermine intellectual property rights by forcing foreign companies to engage in joint ventures with Chinese companies, which then gives the Chinese companies access and permission to use, improve, copy, or steal their technologies. November 1st, China state-owned company charged with Micron secrets theft, from Bloomberg News, December 5th. China's innovation wall, from an article in Foreign Affairs. I'm just giving from this where the sources are from. China is using economic espionage and theft to grab US technology. This is of course from Fox News, and we have to discern and question between Fox and CNN. More centrist, more leftist, more rightist. I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to read and maybe give a little bit of Draganism meditation and perhaps think of some solutions. What do you think the solution to this impasse of trade war is? The US also raises concerns that China fails to recognize legitimate patents and copyrights and discriminates against foreign imported technology, and that China has instituted numerous non-tariff barriers which have insulated sectors of the Chinese economy from international competition. Which sector? I'm thinking the discussions that we know from is mostly financial banking. Thus, the trade war is seen as largely focused on intellectual property in China, especially regarding technology. Structure of political and economic system. The US claims with characteristic communist party-directed planned economy, Chinese state-owned enterprises, and state capitalism pricelings gain the most benefits in most activities, including the Belt and Road Initiative and Made in China 2025. The US, Japan, Canada, Mexico, European Union countries do not recognize China as a market economy, alleging market distortions. economist Irving Stelzer, Stelzer, states China's centrally directed economy, with its goal to preserve Communist Party control of the politics and economy, is relevant to U.S. trade policy. Political scientist and former White House National Security Officer Aaron Friedberg has also said the Communist Party regime has expanded its use of state-directed, market-distorting, mercantilist policies, especially since 2008. The 2018 congressional hearing, U.S. Tools to Address Chinese Market Distortions, discussed how the party leads everything. Doctrine makes China's economy hard for the trading rules to deal with, and results in many U.S. businesses bowing to pressure even though their decisions may jeopardize the future of their companies and the U.S. economy as a whole. This is from hearing on U.S. Tools to Address Chinese Market Distortions, United States China Economic and Security Review Commission in June 8, 2018. What a mess. Do you realize what we're in here? And of course the paradox. China has grown so much since 1984 that has become the main seller, producer, and exporter of goods, while the United States is the main buyer, importer, and market for goods in the world. These two, which are the two pillars of the global financial system, is finance. When finance is finance, everything financial. When we break down all the structures, all the systems, all the complexities, the core, the essence, is about buying and selling, finance, the universe. The U.S. economy as a whole, the structural problem of the Chinese Communist Party's fundamental opposition to free market capitalism and fair competition is claimed by U.S. to be the root of U.S.-China economic tensions. And this was this year, from the dangerous myth the U.S. is winning the trade war with China. Actually, it was from August 4th. There's a rapidly increasing U.S. trade imbalance with China. Former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon called China a totalitarian mercantilist regime in an economic war with the West. This was in September. China is in an economic war with the West, warned Steve Bannon. This was reported by ABC News of Australia. Steve Bannon, Australia is on front lines of economic war with China. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the trade war by China against the United States has been going on for years. The House Asia Pacific Subcommittee Democrat ranking member Brad Sherman, who in 2000 voted no on allowing China's entry to WTO, while the World Trade Organization is in control and command economies like China. A telephone call in the middle of the night from a this is quoting from a monopoly commissar is all that it takes to get a business to do something, said. Monopoly commissar conjures imaginations in, of course, many a Western American psyche. The idea of hammer and sickle. Said China declared trade war on the US 18 years ago. And note 37 here says House Democrat. China declared trade war, not Trump. Taken from the Washington Examiner, July 11th, 2018. This is note 37. So it's stated here. China declared trade war on the US 18 years ago. Citation is note 37 from House Democrat. China declared trade war, not Trump. Washington Examiner reported this. Having Mr. Brad Sherman, Director of the White House National Trade Council and Director of Trade and Industrial Policy, Peter Navarro, a longtime Democrat, calls China a totalitarian regime and states that China's unfair trade policies are economic aggression and a direct result of its autocracy. He emphasizes that economic security is national security and discusses trade in a broader geopolitical arena. President Trump, in his 2018 UN speech, stated China's market distortions and the way they deal cannot be tolerated, while also saying socialism or communism produces suffering, corruption, leads to expansion, incursion, and oppression. All nations of the world should resist socialism and the misery that it brings to everyone, which was seen as also targeting China. The White House criticizes China's market distorting policies within China and around the globe. The White House report, the USTR report, taking an educated guess here, that USTR stands for United States Trade Report. Vice President Mike Pence's landmark China-focused speech and congressional report claims the forced installation of communist body committees and communist board members in all companies, state-owned, non-state-owned, and joint venture foreign companies, to implement its policies, influence, and even form veto power in hiring, selecting leadership, and investment decision making can be inconsistent with market signals. Whatever that means, with market signals. With free market, you mean? Market signals. What a free market, market signals. Confusing the readers. How China's economic aggression threatens the technologies and intellectual property of the United States and the world. White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. How China's economic aggression threatens the technologies and intellectual property of the United States and the world. Vice President Pence blames Vice President Pence blames China has chosen economic aggression, which has in turn emboldened its growing military. This is President Trump's China issues advisor Michael Pillsbury. Kid you not, that's the name, Pillsbury, like the hee hee hee. I could go for a little bit of Pillsbury right now, actually. Trump. Send it to Adrian H. Dragan some Pillsbury syrup. Eat some, drink coffee. Reconciling China. Says the administration's demands challenge all the core elements of China's economic system and its links to the constitution of the Communist Party. In the snow? It's still snowing, huh? No? President Trump's China issues advisor Michael Pillsbury says the administration's demands challenge all the core elements of China's economic system and its links to the constitution of the Communist Party. China claims that for a long time the US government has brazenly preached unilateralism, protectionism, and economic hegemony, made false accusations against many countries and regions, particularly China, intimidated other countries through economic measures such as imposing tariffs, and attempted to impose its own interests on China through extreme pressure. It's a questionable, perhaps unreliable source for this quote, but nonetheless, we know that the response of the Chinese administration has been reciprocal, to say the least, and China has also responded with tariffs. Intellectual property. Richard Trumka, 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 president of the AFL-CIO, which represents over 12 million active and retired workers, said that China had stolen US intellectual property and bullied its way into acquiring critical US advances in technology. He stated in March 2018 that tariffs aren't an end goal, but an important tool to end trade practices that kill American jobs and drive down American pay. Strategic tariffs against China are a critical part of trade reform to create more jobs and better pay. AFL-CIO press release, March 22nd, 2018. In August 2017, the US opened a formal investigation into attacks on the intellectual property of the US and its allies, which cost the US alone an estimated $225 to $600 billion a year. This is reported in the New York Times. Blair Dennis. China's intellectual property theft must stop. August 15, 2017. A number of experts have focused on what they claim is China's theft of intellectual property, and that it forces U.S. firms that want to do business there into transferring its confidential technology and trade secrets before having access to their market. Although that kind of transfer is disallowed by the WTO, the negotiations are usually conducted in secret to avoid penalties. This is from Market Watch in an article entitled "Why is the US Accusing China of Stealing Intellectual Property?" April 2018. The Commission on the Theft of American Intellectual Property states, "Just agreeing to manufacture in China opens yourself to theft or forced technology transfer. It requires a US response based on strengthened leverage." In 2018, the American Chamber of Commerce in China learned that over half its members thought that leakage of intellectual property was an important concern when doing business there. Similarly, the EU, that is the European Union Chamber of Commerce, has also complained that European companies wanting access to the Chinese market often had to agree to transfer vital technology. EU firms in China. Frustration is growing. July 3, 2017. State media declared that the PRC, that is the People's Republic of China, PRC's government's attitude toward the protection of intellectual property rights is clear and firm, and it has continuously strengthened protection at the legislative, law enforcement, and judicial levels, and achieved remarkable results. Full text: China and the World Trade Organization. Xinhua, that is the Chinese news outlet organization. Technology. Many countries and companies have accused Chinese spies and hackers of stealing technological and scientific secrets through the planting of software bugs and by infiltrating industries, institutions, and universities. China was also accused it benefited itself from stealing foreign designs, flouting of product copyrights, and a two-speed patent system that discriminates against foreign firms with unreasonably longer times. Note 66 from July 11, 2017. Beijing networks in US maneuver up to 25,000 spies. Beijing networks in US maneuver up to 25,000 spies. Beijing networks in US maneuver up to 25,000 spies. Washington Times. Washington Times. Chinese intelligence service was accused of assisting Chinese companies by stealing company secrets. U.S. Senator Mark Warner, the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, called Huawei a threat to U.S. national security. Basically kidnapping. China's state media lashes out at Canada over arrest of Huawei's executive. Global News, 7 December 7, 2018. And of course myself as a Canadian, world citizen, North American. The diplomatic crisis says. And is continuing. U.S. officials have accused Chinese spies and hackers of stealing sensitive and top US military technology, including B-12, B-2, that is stealth bomber, C-17 transport aircraft, F-117 stealth attack aircraft, F-22nd and F-35 stealth fighters, aircraft engine military helicopter, unmanned aerial vehicle, unmanned underwater vehicle destroyer, air cushion landing craft, submarine missile satellite weapons system, robotics, artificial intelligence, semiconductor, solid state drive, cellular mobile communications technology, software, among almost all types of armaments and advanced technology. Note 77 here from Pentagon. Chinese hackers have stolen data from almost every major US defense contractor. May 7, 2013. From the New York Times in October 30th of 2018, a few months ago. Chinese intelligence officers accused of stealing aerospace secrets. 16th of December 2016 from Fox News. China stole US underwater drone in South China Sea as Americans watched. National security experts in the US said Chinese hackers had consistently stolen trade secrets from US defense contractors. Chinese hackers had consistently stolen trade secrets from US defense contractors. This prompted former director of the National Security Agency Keith B. Alexander, who called Chinese cyber theft of intellectual property as the greatest transfer of wealth in history. Yeah, okay. Perhaps he doesn't, this fellow, Mr. Keith B. Alexander hasn't yet learned interest and credit card interest and banking interest. Should also address that. They're smacking him a few times around the head. Blair Dennis, Alexander Keith. China's intellectual property theft must stop. This, he stated. This quarter is stating, Chinese spies have gone after private defense contractors and subcontractors, national laboratories, public research universities, think tanks, and the American government itself. Chinese agents have gone after the United States' most significant weapons, such as the F-35 Lightning, the Aegis combat system, and the Patriot missile system, illegally exported unmanned underwater vehicles, and thermal imaging cameras, and stolen documents related to the B-52 bomber, the Delta IV rocket, the F-15 fighter, and even the space shuttle. President Trump's action on Monday acknowledges the broad scope of the challenge. This is in the New York Times, August 15, 2017. China's intellectual property theft must stop. New York Times. The US claims that China requires technology transfer through foreign direct investment, FDI, Note 3093. The evolution of China's foreign investment policy and law. Geo Sean. Note 93. US claims that China requires technology transfer through foreign direct investment, FDI. Note 93. Foreign direct investment regime and required joint ventures. In many cases, technology transfers are effectively required by China's foreign direct investment (FDI) regime, which closes off important sectors of the economy to foreign firms. In order to gain access to these sectors, China forces foreign firms to enter into joint ventures with Chinese entities they do not have any connection. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary for Clinton and economist Larry Summers once said, "China's technological progress is coming from terrific entrepreneurs who are getting the benefit of huge government investment in basic science. It's coming from an educational system that's privileging excellence, concentrating on science and technology. That's where their leadership in some technologies is coming from, not from taking a stake in some US company." Larry Summers praises China's state investment in tech, saying it doesn't need to steal from US. CNBC reported. It was in an interview. China claims that the technical cooperation and other economic and trade cooperation between Chinese and foreign enterprises are completely based on the voluntary principle of contractual behavior, and both companies have obtained practical benefits. And over the years, American companies in China have received huge returns for technology transfer and licensing, and are the biggest beneficiaries of technical cooperation. A white paper lays out facts about China-US trade frictions. Reasons for the US to implement tariff sanctions. US trade deficit by country in billions. 2017. The US trade deficit in billions goods and services by country in 2017. China, it was 337 million. In June 2016, the presidential candidate Donald Trump vowed to cancel international trade deals and go on an offensive against Chinese economic practices, describing his promise as a reaction against a leadership class that worships globalism, whatever that means. Worship globalism. June 28, 2016. Donald Trump vows to rip up trade deals and confront China. Donald Trump vows to rip up trade deals and confront China. Donald Trump vows to rip up trade deals and confront China. New York Times, June 20, 2016. Reaction against a leadership class that worships globalism. Less than a year after he took office, the United States, European Union, and Japan agreed to work within the World Trade Organization and other multilateral groups to eliminate unfair subsidies by countries which create non-competitive conditions through state-owned enterprises, forced technology transfers, and local content requirements. In April 2018, Trump denied that the dispute was actually a trade war, saying that the war was lost many years ago by the foolish or incompetent people who represented the US. He added, "Now we have a trade deficit of 500 billion a year, with intellectual property theft of another 300 billion. We cannot let this continue." This quoted as saying, April 2018, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, China, tariffs amount to only 0.3% of US GDP. We cannot let this continue. In January 2018, Trump said he wanted the United States to have a good relationship with China, but insisted that it treat the United States fairly. In his State of the Union address a few weeks later, he stated, "America has also finally turned the page on decades of unfair trade deals that sacrificed our prosperity and shipped away our companies, our jobs, and our nation's wealth. The era of economic surrender is over. From now on, we expect trading relationships to be fair and to be reciprocal. We will work to fix bad trade deals and negotiate new ones, and we will protect American workers and American intellectual property through strong enforcement of our trade rules." President Donald Trump's State of the Union Address 2018, retrieved NBC News, January 30th, 2018. America's aluminum industry needs Trump's fair trade vision. Washington Examiner, February 9, 2018. President Donald J. Trump's State of the Union Address, White House, January 30th, 2018. A number of government and industry experts have offered their own rationales about why the tariffs are or are not appropriate. John Ferriola, the CEO and president of Nucor, America's largest steel producer and its largest metal recycler, claimed that tariffs were not unfair, but were simply leveling the playing field. He explained to TV host Jim Cramer that not only the European Union, but most countries in the world have a 25% or greater VAT, that is value-added tax, on products going into their countries from the United States. So if we impose a 25% tariff, all we are doing is treating them exactly as they treat us. Nucor CEO on Trump tariffs. We're treating other countries how they treat us. March 5th, 2018. Value-added tax is a sales tax which is charged regardless of origin. Analyst Zachary Carabel claimed that the administration's desire to reject long-standing trade consensus in favor of a more nationalist approach will not succeed. A set of very public and punitive tariffs will not reverse what has already been transferred, and will not do much to address the challenge of China today, which is no longer a manufacturing neophyte. Why Trump's misguided China tariffs won't help the US. This is from the Wired magazine, Wired, March 31st, 2018. Wired. Peter Navarro, White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy Director, gave a number of the administration's explanations for the tariffs, among them are that they are purely defensive measures. He claims that the cumulative trillions of dollars Americans transfer overseas as a result of yearly deficits are then used by those countries to buy America's assets, as opposed to investing that money in the US. If we do as we're doing, those trillions of dollars are in the hands of foreigners that they can then use to buy up America. Middle talks trade and tariffs. March 15, 2018. To buy up America. Our pursuit of our individual businesses, which often involves transferring manufacturing and a great deal of engineering out of the country, has hindered our ability to bring innovations to scale at home. Without scaling, we don't just lose jobs, we lose our hold on new technologies. Losing the ability to scale will ultimately damage our capacity to innovate. Andrew Grove, co-founder and former CEO of Intel. This is July. Andrew Grove, How America Can Create Jobs. This is from July 1st, 2010. Bloomberg News, 2010, July 1st. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, after a 7-month investigation into China and intellectual property, explained that the value of the tariffs imposed was based on U.S. estimates of the actual economic damage caused by China's alleged IP, that is intellectual property theft, and the forced transfer of technology to Chinese companies. March 22, 2018, from Washington Post, an article called What's Intellectual Property and Does China Steal? In response, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang promised in March 2018 to henceforth protect the rights of foreigners investing in its economy, followed in April by an announcement by China that it would eliminate laws that required global automakers and shipbuilders to work through state-owned partners. That's interesting. It's interesting. President of China Xi Jinping reiterated those pledges, affirming a desire to increase imports, lower foreign ownership limits on manufacturing, and expand protection to intellectual property, all central issues in Trump's complaints about their trade imbalance. Trump thanked Xi for his kind words on tariffs and automobile barriers, and his enlightenment on intellectual property and technology transfers. We will make great progress together, the president added. This is retrieved from Washington Post, April 10, 2018. Facing trade war with the US, China's Xi renews war to open markets, import more. Interesting. So Xi a little bit said, I'm gonna do this and that to alleviate the matter, so that sort of a reconciling tone, a sort of yes, okay, we'll do more, we'll do this, we'll do that. Your grievances have been heard. We are ready to do something about it, but that wasn't enough. In August 2018, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross said that at the end of the day, we have many more bullets than they do. They know it. Michael Martino, David Lauder. August 23rd, 2018. US-China trade war escalates as new tariffs kick in. August 23rd, 2018. According to a January 14, 2019 article in the Wall Street Journal, despite US imposed tariffs, in 2018 China's annual trade surplus was, listen to this, 323.32 billion. 1 billion is 1,000 million. I'm gonna say that again. So 1 billion is 1,000 million. A billion is followed by 9 zeros. So this is huge macro economic level billions. So the trade surplus is tremendous actually. In 2018, China's annual trade surplus was 323.32 billion, a record high. A record high. In 2018, China's annual trade surplus was 323.32 billion, a record high. February 6, 2018. The New York Times reported that in 2017, the trade deficit had also reached a record high. So consecutive years. February 6, 2018. US-China trade deficit hits record, fueling trade fight. Arguments that China unfairly controls imports. It is claimed that China has instituted an array of non-tariff barriers meant that some critical sectors of the Chinese economy remained relatively insulated from international competition. China has controlled imports by having different standards for private foreign companies than for Chinese state-owned companies. This is from June 2018, Brazil. China's forced technology transfer problem and what to do about it. And there's a PDF there to be informed about it. What to do about it. Lee G. Branstetter, a professor of economics and public policy at Carnegie Mellon University, listed some of the ways that China has misappropriated foreign technology. China's forced technology transfer problem, what to do about it. In a report issued March 22nd, 2018, the US cited numerous instances of forced technology transfer and the failure of companies and the government to protect US intellectual property from infringement or theft. Soon after the report came out, the US announced plans to impose tariffs on up to $60 billion worth of Chinese exports to the United States and tighten the rules governing Chinese investment in the United States. Arguments that the World Trade Organization sanction mechanism is slow and ineffective amid doubts over the costs of US comprehensive strength and leverage, alleged security implications, China's allegedly terrible human rights records. The Clinton administration in 2000 approved China's entry to the World Trade Organization. However, the US claimed that China has failed to fulfill its promise for reforms and requirements to be a WTO member, further claiming that flaws in the rules of the current trading system lets China limit imports with high tariffs and discriminatory regulations, subsidize exports with an inexpensive currency, and generous credit through state-controlled banks, bully foreign investors, pirate Western intellectual property which allegedly gives it trade advantages. The US claims that the World Trade Organization for a long time didn't punish China's cheating. This is big. do you make of all this? Let me know. How do we find a resolution, a solution to this impasse, to this trade war? Is it gonna go? It's gonna be escalating. As I'm speaking, the China-Canadian diplomatic crisis is ongoing since December 1st. For a long time, didn't punish China's cheating. The view that China manipulates its currency, the yuan renminbi, for its own benefit in trade has been refuted by U.S. organizations such as Cato Institute, Trade Policy Studies Fellow Daniel Pearson, National Taxpayer Union Policy, Government Affairs Manager Clark Packard, entrepreneur and Forbes contributor Louis Woodhill, Henry Kaufman, professor of financial institutions at Columbia University, child economist Dolan Bill, professor of international economics, Michael V. Klein, Harvard University Kennedy School of Government, professor Jeffrey Frankel, Bloomberg columnist William Pesek, Quartz reporter Gwen Guilford, the Wall Street Journal Digital Network editor-in-chief Randall W. Forsyth, United Courier Services and China Learning Curve. President Trump has pushed the WTO, which expressly based on open, market-oriented policies and rooted in the principles of non-discrimination, market access, reciprocity, fairness, and transparency to reform, or he may pull the U.S. out as a member. Others, such as White House Council of Economic Advisors, has repeatedly urged the system consider to evict China out of the WTO, as we never really envisioned that a country would enter the WTO and then behave the way that China has. It's a new thing for the WTO to have a member that is misbehaving so much. Congress urges real and tough actions against China. Before the Trump administration took concrete measures against China in late March 2018, Democratic leaders in both chambers of Congress have continuously criticized President Trump as being a total paper tiger and doing virtually nothing on trade but study it. They pressed the president to focus more on China rather than allies and take real punishments, such as fulfill his own campaign commitments to label China a currency manipulator on his first day in office and stop China from pressuring U.S. tech companies into giving up intellectual property rights. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said China has stolen millions of jobs and trillions of dollars, but administration from both parties haven't been strong enough to fight back. Schumer has stated by both parties. Big American companies fiercely protect their intellectual property and trade secrets, fearful of giving an edge to rivals, but they have little choice in China. Washington is looking on with alarm. To gain access to the Chinese market, American companies are being forced to transfer technology, create joint ventures, lower prices, and aid homegrown players. Those efforts form the backbone of President Xi Jinping's ambitious plan to ensure that China's companies, military and government dominate core areas of technology like artificial intelligence and semiconductors. The New York Times, Note 155. August 4, 2017. How this U.S. tech giant is backing China's tech ambitions. The New York Times. It is 12:34 p.m. Beijing. It's noon in Beijing. China is about noon. The Trump administration said the tariffs were necessary to protect intellectual property of U.S. businesses and to help reduce the U.S. trade deficit with China. Note 156. White House retrieved April 7, 2018. Statement from President Donald J. Trump on additional proposed Section 301 remedies. China has criticized the U.S. restrictions of some of its sensitive high technology products, their unfair treatments of China's market economy status, and unreasonable trade tariffs. Dragan, vice chairman of the Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, said that China never wants a trade war with anybody, not to mention the U.S., who has been a long-term strategic partner. But we also do not fear such a war. The U.S. side has disregarded a consensus with China after multiple rounds of consultations, insisting on waging a trade war against China and continuing to escalate it. CNBC retrieved November 1st from October 22nd. Schwartz, Brian. Chinese official tells American investors at a meeting, "We don't fear a trade war with the U.S." while White House Deputy Press Secretary Lindsey Walters said that the goal of United States trade actions is not to harm China's economy or start a trade war, but to get China to follow through on allowing fair competition and stop their unfair trade practices that have been hurting the American workers for years. Since filing for consultations with the WTO, neither party has agreed on an overall solution, which has led to a continuing trade conflict and more discussions. Chronology of tariff events. January 22, 2018, President Trump placed a 30% tariff on foreign solar panels to be reduced to 15 after 4 years. China, the world leader in solar panel manufacture, decried the tariffs. So China is the world leader in solar. This was in January 2018. China blasts Trump's new trade tariff. CNN Money, January 23rd, 2018, retrieved January 23rd, 2018. A year from now, actually, from the past 1 year. On solar panels, China, the world leader in solar panel manufacture, decried the tariffs. I'm actually a strong advocate promoter of solar energy as a primary source of energy, and conversion in a slow move towards solar. China, the world leader in solar panel manufacture, decried the tariffs. That same day, tariffs of 20% were placed on washing machines for the first 1.2 million units imported during the year. In 2016, China exported 425 million worth of washers to the United States. March 1st, 2018, President Trump imposed tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum. The tariff would have a greater effect on some other countries, including allies such as Canada and South Korea rather than China. March 22nd, 2018, President Trump asked the United States Trade Representative, USTR, investigate applying tariffs on US 50 to 60 billion worth of Chinese goods. He relied on Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 for doing so, stating that the proposed tariffs were a response to the unfair trade practices of China over the years, including theft of U.S. intellectual property. Note 156. White House retrieved April 7, 2018. Statement from President Donald Trump on additional proposed Section 301 remedies. Over 1,300 categories of Chinese imports were listed for tariffs, including aircraft parts, batteries, flat panel televisions, medical devices, satellites, and various weapons. April 2nd, 2018, China responded by imposing tariffs on 128 products it imports from America, including aluminum, airplanes, cars, pork, and soybeans, which have a 25% tariffs, as well as fruit, nuts, and steel piping, 15%. On April 5th, 2018, Trump responded saying that he was considering another round of tariffs on an additional 100 billion of Chinese imports as Beijing retaliates. The next day, the World Trade Organization received requests from China for consultations on new U.S. tariffs. May 15, 2018, Vice Premier Liu He, top economic advisor to President of China, the chairman of the People's Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping, visited Washington for further trade talks. May 20th, 2018, Chinese officials agreed to substantially reduce America's trade deficit with China by committing to significantly increase its purchases of American goods. As a result, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin announced that we are putting the trade war on hold. White House National Trade Council Director Peter Navarro, however, said that there was no trade war, but that it was a trade dispute, fair and simple. We lost the trade war long ago. May 29, 2018, the White House announced that it would impose a 20% tariff on 50 billion of Chinese goods with industrially significant technology. The full list of products affected to be announced by June 15, 2018. It also planned to impose investment restrictions and enhance export controls on certain Chinese individuals and organizations to prevent them from acquiring US technology. China said it would discontinue trade talks with Washington if it imposed trade sanctions. June 15, 2018. Trump declared that the United States would impose a 25% tariff on 50 billion of Chinese exports. 34 billion would start July 6th, 2018, with a further 16 billion to begin at a later date. China's Commerce Ministry accused the United States of launching a trade war and said China would respond in kind with similar tariffs for US imports starting on July 6, 2018. 3 days later, the White House declared that the United States would impose additional 10% tariffs on another 200 billion worth of Chinese imports if China retaliated against these US tariffs. The list of products included in this round of tariffs was released on July 11, 2018, and was set to be implemented within 60 days. 3 days later, the White House declared that the United States would impose additional 10% tariffs on another 200 billion worth of Chinese imports if China retaliated against these US tariffs. The list of products included in this round of tariffs were released July 11, 2018. It was set to be implemented within 60 days. June 19, 2018, China retaliated almost immediately, threatening its own tariffs on 50 billion of US goods, and claimed the United States had launched a trade war. Import and export markets in a number of nations feared the tariffs would disrupt supply chains, which could ripple around the globe. Which could ripple around the globe. Could ripple around the globe. July 6th. 2018, American tariffs on 34 billion of Chinese goods came into effect. China imposed retaliatory tariffs on US goods of a similar value. The tariffs accounted for 0.1% of the global gross domestic product. China heads back after US imposes tariffs worth 34 billion. BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, July 6th. Retrieved July 6, 2018. From British Broadcasting Corporation. On July 10, 2018, US released an initial list of the additional 200 billion of Chinese goods that would be subject to a 10% tariff. China vowed to retaliate with additional tariffs on American goods worth 60 billion annually 2 days later. Caixin Global reports China owes retaliatory tariffs on 60 billion in US goods. August 8, 2018. The Office of the United States Trade Representative published its finalized list of 279 Chinese goods worth 60 billion to be subject to a 25% tariff from August 23, 2018. China responded with its own tariffs of equal value when the American tariffs were implemented on August 23, 2018. August 14, 2018. China filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization (WTO), claiming that US tariffs on foreign solar panels clash with World Trade Organization (WTO) ruling and have destabilized the international market for solar PV products. China claimed the resulting impact directly harmed China's legitimate trade interests. August 22, 2018, U.S. Treasury Undersecretary David Malpass and Chinese Commerce Vice Minister Wang Shouwen met in Washington, D.C. in a bid to reopen negotiations. Meanwhile, on August 23, 2018, the U.S. and China's promised tariffs on 60 billion of goods took effect. And on August 27, 2018, China filed a new WTO complaint against the U.S. regarding the additional tariffs. September 17, 2018, the U.S. announced its 10% tariff on 200 billion worth of Chinese goods would begin on September 24, 2018, increasing to 25% by the end of the year. They also threatened tariffs on an additional 267 billion worth of imports if China retaliates. They also threatened tariffs on an additional 267 billion worth of imports if China retaliates, which China promptly did on September 18 with 10% tariffs on 60 billion of US imports. China's tariffs on the US. History, Asia, Pedia, Desan Sharia, and Associates. So far, China has either imposed or proposed tariffs on 110 billion of US goods, representing most of its imports of American products. Chen Yao and Lauder David, September 18, 2018. China says Trump forces its hand, will retaliate against new US tariffs. Reuters. December 1st, 2018. The planned increases in tariffs were postponed The White House stated that both parties will immediately begin negotiations on structural changes with respect to forced technology transfer, intellectual property protection, non-tariff barriers, cyber intrusions, and cyber theft. And December 1st is, of course, when the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or Federal National Police in Canada, arrested Meng Huangzhou, Chief Financial Officer of Huawei, reported to be the biggest telecommunications corporation in the world in terms of the quantity of hardware and telecommunications hardware that they produce, has overtaken Apple to become the second after Samsung in terms of smartphone production last year. Reported to be the number one telecommunications equipment maker in the world, which includes, of course, for internet infrastructure such as servers and routers, and of course cell phone towers, and big in the 5G, 5th generation starting game. So December 1st, the planned increase in tariffs were postponed. The White House stated that both parties will immediately begin negotiations on structural changes with respect to forced technology transfer, intellectual property protection, non-tariff barriers, cyber intrusions, and cyber theft. Temporary retrieve. President Trump appointed Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer as lead negotiator to oversee the 90-day negotiation. The threatened tariff increase on the additional $200 billion in Chinese goods by the US and the retaliatory increase in tariffs on American goods was postponed in early December 2018. During a dinner at the 2018 G20 Buenos Aires summit, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping agreed to delay their planned increases in tariffs for 90 days. BBC News reported this in December 2nd, actually. US and China agreed to suspend new tariffs. British Broadcasting Corporation News, BBC News, BBC, not to be mistaken with the porn acronym. British Broadcasting Corporation, not Donald Trump and Xi Jinping agreed to delay their planned increases in tariffs for 90 days, starting on December 1st, to allow time for the two countries. And of course, December 1st was when for me it's a special holiday, of course, solar holiday, I should say, because of passing of my prophet, Aleister Crowley. For 90 days starting on December 1st, to allow time for the two countries to negotiate their trade dispute. So December 1st, January, February, March. So technically it would be until March 1st, right? And then what happened, what we see, what's happening now. At the end of the 90 days, the parties are unable to reach an agreement. The 10% tariffs will be raised to 25%. The U.S. Trade Representative's office confirms the hard deadline for China's structural changes is March 1st, 2019. The U.S. Trade Representative's office confirms the hard deadline for China's structural changes is March 1st, 2019. The U.S. Trade Representative's office confirms the hard deadline for China's structural changes is March 1st, 2019. If China fails to do reform which supposed done years ago. The 25% tariffs on 200 billion of Chinese goods will be imposed since 12:01 a.m. Eastern. 25% on 200 billion. That's 50 billion total. That's a quarter of 200 billion. That's 50 billion. 50 billion. 50 billion of Chinese goods will be imposed since 12 a.m. Eastern time zone on March 2nd, 2019. Goods will be imposed since it was 1 minute after midnight, basically 12:01 a.m. Eastern time zone, ETZ, on March 2nd, 2019. US says March 1st hard deadline for trade deal with China. Reuters, December 9, 2018. Hard deadline. US sets new March 2nd date for China tariff increases amid talks. Reuters, December 14th. March 1st, March 2nd, basically. At midnight, first minute into March 2nd. On March 2nd, 2019, Sarah Huckabee Sanders told the news media that China had agreed to purchase a very substantial amount of soybeans and other agricultural, energy, industrial, and other products from the US. Larry Kudlow said that China had agreed to reduce the 40% tariff on cars coming into China from the US, although Beijing had not confirmed that by December 4, 2018. On that date, an article in the state-controlled newspapers Securities Daily said that the Chinese government was considering a reduction in the auto tariff but provided no specifics. A White House statement also said that the two leaders had agreed to immediately begin negotiations on structural changes with respect to forced technology transfer, intellectual property protection, non-tariff barriers, cyber intrusions, and cyber theft services and agriculture. A Chinese diplomat commented on December 1 that the two heads of state reached consensus to halt the mutual increase of new tariffs, and that the country would increase its purchases from the US to gradually ease the imbalance in two-way trade. The official announcement from Beijing did not confirm the plan for such purchases, but said that both leaders were striving for a mutually beneficial agreement. CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, December 4th, 2018. Truce on US-China tariffs brings relief for now, but risks extending a trade war later. Other measures. On October 17, 2018, the United States announced its withdrawal from the Universal Postal Union in order to renegotiate international shipping rates for mail and small packages. China had been paying lower rates because it was considered a developing nation. The United States seeks to charge the same rates for all countries. The withdrawal can be rescinded if an agreement is found within 1 year. Interesting. It's fascinating. How fascinating we're learning. October 18, 2018. St. Justin, Samuel Lisa. Trump to withdraw U.S. from postal treaty, squeezing China. Bloomberg News. October 17, 2018. Influence. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said that the planned Chinese tariffs only reflected 0.3% of U.S. gross domestic product. And Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders stated that the moves would have short-term pain but bring long-term success. Harry G. Broadman, a former U.S. trade negotiator, has argued the Trump administration's bilateral approach towards China, particularly one focused on imposing tariffs to bring about a reduction in the merchandise trade balance between China and the US, will be self-defeating if not misdirected. Broadman believes it would be more effective if the U.S. built and led a coalition of major trading partners to press China on a multilateral basis to renegotiate its 2001 accession agreement for membership in the WTO. Quoted as saying on 2018 April, the coalition-based trade strategy Trump should pursue towards China. New York Fed President John Williams said on December 4, 2018, that he believes the U.S. economy will stay strong in 2019. Williams expects that increases in the interest rates would be necessary to maintain the economy. He stated, given this outlook of strong growth, strong labor market, and inflation near our goal, and taking account all the various risks around the outlook, I do expect further gradual increases in interest rates will best sponsor a sustained economic expansion. Market watch Fed's will call for the continued interest rate hikes. White House National Trade Council Director Peter Navarro claimed that a self-appointed group of billionaires related to Goldman Sachs of Wall Street pressed on the White House, claiming that it was a part of a Chinese government influence operation that weakens the president and the U.S. negotiating position. He called them unregistered foreign agents for supposedly interfering with negotiations and violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, urging them to invest in Dayton, Ohio, and America factory towns where a rebirth of manufacturing base is needed. Strong bipartisan pushes for firm and further actions against China. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer praised President Trump's higher tariffs against China's alleged taking advantage of the U.S. and said Democrats, Republicans, Americans of every political ideology, every region in the country should support these actions. In the meanwhile, he warns Trump administration not to let China play them, and President Trump should not back off his pledges to punish Beijing. Most Democratic senators, including committee ranking members Bob Menendez for Regional Banking, Ron Wyden Finance, claimed that Americans confront rampant theft of U.S. intellectual property, forced data storage, localization policies, agricultural policies that disadvantage American farmers, dumping shoddy goods, restrictions on market access for U.S. service providers and manufacturers, and mercantilist industrial policies that have cost U.S. workers their jobs. And with that, we wrap it up.